Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the tiers as I see it in this conference. I think the only one that's set in stone right now is those three teams at the top. Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State are on a little bit of a different level than everyone else in the conference. But now let's get into some players to watch, because I think there's a whole lot of teams in this conference that don't necessarily have absolute difference makers, don't necessarily have dudes that are going to totally change games. They do have guys that I think in the right situation, in the right Saturday, any given Saturday type approach, they can do some really special things. And let's go ahead and jump into this because I think there's a couple of guys in this conference that maybe you don't even know the name of. That could very well be the reason that there's a big time upset one Saturday in the Big Ten. Let's start with Illinois and Hudson Clement, a very talented wide receiver, come over from West Virginia in the portal. He's one of those guys that I think has upward mobility. He's one of those guys that went for over 700 yards a year ago. Very thin room over there at Illinois at the wide receiver position, so he kind of has to hit it big if they're going to find a way to do with the things that they want to do this year. But very talented kid that absolutely can be a big-time target. Probably has to be the number one target for Luke Altmaier this upcoming year. And then you got Gabe Jacas, one of the best players in the entire conference. He had 74 tackles, 8 sacks, 3 forced fumbles a year ago. He's going to be a game wrecker. He needs to be a game wrecker for this team. I think the defense on the back end is plenty talented. I think it'd be a lot of help if that defensive line could really get after him, and Gabe Jacas is going to be the one that leads the way in that respect. I can absolutely promise you that. In Illinois, it's one of those teams that really expects to hit this year. These two guys are going to have as much to do with it as just about anyone. Indiana, Roman Hemby coming over from Rutgers is huge. Or Maryland, excuse me. Coming over from Maryland is absolutely massive. It was huge. The run game was massive for them a year ago. I know Elijah Surratt in the past game kind of stole all the headlines, but they had some really, really huge running backs that made some massive plays for them down the stretch and just kept things moving down the field. You didn't have to always be the explosive team that made all the big-time plays. You can just get 3 or 4 yards of carry and kind of just wear teams down. I think Roman Hemby can do that. He had 600 plus yards a year ago, 6 touchdowns. I think he's a guy that maybe won't be the bell cow of an offense, but absolutely will be a great addition. Will probably be the running back 1, and then you have someone else kind of help him out on the back end as the running back 2, the running back 3, however many guys you want to rotate into that position. Obviously, Curt Cignetti likes to use a number of running backs, and I think this is probably going to be his premier guy this year. Then you have Michael Kamara, 10 sacks a year ago, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries. This guy is what I would describe as active and angry. He is absolutely one of the best players in this conference. One of those guys that when you look at Indiana this year, a lot of people question it because the schedule got tougher. You lose some big-time pieces from a year ago. You kept this guy. And if you keep this guy, he can do so many special things for you this year. He can make every quarterback's life a nightmare and be one of those teams where when you play in Oregon, when you play a Penn State, more in Oregon, at least in my mind, because of the new quarterback situation there, if he gets after the quarterback early, maybe some mistakes start to happen. And then Indiana sitting at the end of the fourth quarter up 7 points, they've won a massive game and they're right on their way to another CFP. Then you got Iowa. Reese Vanderzee totally stole the show in the first week of the season. They played Illinois State. He scored 2 touchdowns. Didn't hear too much from him after that. Had a couple of catches here and there. Played some pretty good football from time to time. He's probably the most talented guy in this wide receiver room. He's probably someone that you're going to need to unlock this year just that little bit more. As we all know about Iowa, they're going to be a run-first team. But you don't have Caleb Johnson in the backfield this year, so you're going to have to find ways to be a little bit more multiple, to be a little bit more dynamic. This is probably the guy that's going to make that happen for you, if anyone is. So he's going to have to be a huge player, probably do it against other teams other than Illinois State. So we're going to have to see how that really plays out. But a very talented kid that could give that Iowa offense at least a little bit of pop in the pass game that they very badly need. And then you got Xavier Wongpa. I think it's one of those guys that has all the ability in the world. Very, very good in run defense, very confident tackler, and one of those guys that I don't think he's necessarily going to wow you with a one-handed INT. Maybe he will. Now that I said that, he probably will. But at the end of the day, he's someone that will really give structure to this defense and give a really, really confident back end where they're communicating all the time. Everyone is exactly where they need to be. And this guy will be a huge reason for that. He's an incredible, incredible communicator and a really rangy player. One of those guys that comes out into the box very, very aggressively, and absolutely someone that can play at least good pass defense. And not necessarily special, but plays the zone really well. And then when you need him to come, absolutely lay someone out, he's more than happy to do that. Going over to Maryland, Jaleel Farouk is someone that they're just going to have to hit big if they're going to want to do something special. Had some injuries last year at Oklahoma, only 58 yards on the entire season. He's a really talented kid. Very long, very athletic, absolutely someone that if Maryland can get just a little bit more out of him, well, a lot more than 58 yards, but just a little bit more in terms of what his ability is, I think they can do some really, really interesting things. Now, again, I don't necessarily love this Maryland team. I do think they're a team that has a couple of guys that can make some big-time differences, and Dante Joyner on the defensive side is very much like that. Had 2 INTs, 7 pass deflections at Jacksonville State a year ago, or Arkansas State, excuse me, but very talented kid. Absolutely someone that will probably be a starter for this team, and whenever you're Maryland, you have to have some of these, lower level guys that come up from the group of 5 level to try to play at your team. They got to hit in a lot of different ways, and I think this is one of those guys that if he doesn't hit, then Maryland's given up a lot of big-time plays this year, if they weren't already, frankly. Then you got Michigan, and Donovan McCulley coming in from Indiana is a must-hit. There's no two ways about that. If they don't have a game-changer at wide receiver, this offense is only going to be so good. Now, I love Justice Haynes. I think he's going to be incredible. I love Jordan Marshall. I think he's going to be really good as well. The run game is not remotely the problem. It will pretty much never be the problem over there at Michigan. Donovan McCulley and these other wide receivers have to help out this quarterback. If they don't, he's going to be trying to make plays by himself, and whenever a freshman has to do that, it doesn't end very well. The reason that Trevor Lawrence was so exceptional as a freshman was because he had a lot of really good stuff around him, and those wide receivers were more than happy to help him out quite a few times, and I think Michigan's going to need that this year. Whether it's Donovan McCulley or one of the other guys in that room, someone's got to step up big. I just tend to believe McCulley has the most talent in that room as of right now. And then you got Derek Moore. This is going to be a household name by the end of the year. If you don't know this name outside of Ann Arbor, you're going to learn it very quickly, especially if you play Michigan this upcoming year. 4 sacks on the year. He was a force late in the season, especially against Alabama, which is all over the place in that game. He is the next great edge rusher from Michigan, and I think he's going to be a nightmare this year. I think he kind of has to be a nightmare this year in some respects. Love the Michigan back end, but when you lose a guy like Will Johnson, there's a number of things that could happen that could not be all that great for your team, especially when you add in that you're losing the 2 defensive tackles that walked out the door in Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. They're going to have a really good pass rush, and I think they have all the tools to have that. I think Derek Moore is probably the best of those tools, one of those guys that can be really an All-American type player, maybe Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year type level. Moving over to Michigan State, Nick Marsh is as good as it gets at wide receiver, and all these other freshman wide receivers that got love, whether you want to talk about Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams or even a Ryan Wingo down at Texas, Nick Marsh is incredible, and he was incredible last year as a freshman, 649 yards, 3 scores. If they can put it together, him and Aiden Childs, it could be one of the better 1-2 punches in the entire conference. Now, I don't know how well the defense is going to play on the other side of that, but I do think it's one of those connections that could totally change games. There could be one game this year where he goes for 150, 2 scores, and they end up getting a big-time upset. I would not be shocked at all. He's a unique talent that has all the ability in the world to make a lot of cornerbacks very upset this upcoming year. And then you got Joshua Eaton coming over from Oklahoma, 5 pass deflections a year ago. The talent is there. There's no doubt about that. He has all the ability in the world, is very, very good at high pointing the football, as you can see in that video or in that picture. He can play really, really good football. I think with Jonathan Smith, hopefully they can put it together because that was kind of Michigan State's big Achilles heel. They couldn't put it together on offense and defense at the same time. I think the offense is going to be better as long as the defense can take that little step forward. Could be pretty special times up there in East Lansing. Then you got Minnesota, and we talked about these guys just a little bit in the last segment. Drake Lindsey's a really interesting player. He's probably the only quarterback in this conference that you really don't know the name of or probably haven't heard of yet. Really talented kid, number one player out of Minnesota, had a number of offers coming out of high school, but decided to stay home, decided to go to Minnesota. It sounds like he's turning heads in a big way during fall camp, and really, since he showed up on campus, he's been a big name to watch, but he's going to be huge. He's going to be an incredible player. Coy Parrish is going to be the show. There's no doubt about that. He's going to play both ways this year. Has one of the coolest practice jerseys that I've ever seen that split right down the middle with offense on one side and defense on the other. He had 5 picks a year ago. He returns punts. This kid is unique in every sense of the word. You thought Cooper DeJean was wild. This kid's going to be even crazier. And it's incredible to watch what he can do, especially at a place like Minnesota. I understand, if he was on a Penn State or an Ohio State, it would be really cool. He also wouldn't be playing both ways, so cannot wait to see what happens this year for Coy Parrish. I think he's one of those just elite talent guys that might just be able to make Minnesota one of those really tough outs in this conference that they really have been for the last couple of years. Coy Parrish makes that just that little bit tougher this year. Over at Nebraska, Dane Key is one of the biggest portal additions in the entire conference to me. I think he's a guy that absolutely can up the level of play. 700 yards and 2 scores a year ago on a team that barely had a quarterback at times. And no disrespect to Brock Vandegrift, no disrespect to Cutter Boley. It was tough. It was tough for a large majority of that season for Kentucky at the quarterback position, and Dane Key made it happen. Same way Barry and Brown did, and both of them found their way to new teams this offseason. But Dane Key followed Dikio Shorts, the wide receiver coach, from Kentucky to Nebraska. I think this is a guy that has to be a hit. I think he might have to be your number one wide receiver. Obviously, him and Raiola have to get on the same page, but it's a very talented kid that is as professional of a route runner as you're going to see in the entire country. He's very, very good getting in and out of his breaks. I think he can be a huge player for this team and maybe even top 1,000 yards if things go the right way for this guy. And then Keona Davis on the interior of the line. You lost some real big players in Nash Hutmacher, as well as Ty Robinson this past offseason. Defensive tackle is huge, especially in the Big Ten when they're going to be running the football very aggressively. If they don't have answers at the defensive tackle position, they got a problem. And I think Keona Davis just has to be the answer there. Moving on to Northwestern, probably the worst team in this conference, but we'll find out. Griffin Wilde is a guy you're going to want to know the name of. Coming over from South Dakota State, this kid is awesome. He's a very, very good football player. He's an incredible wide receiver that is very long, plenty athletic, can definitely have some speed after the catch. I think if him and Preston Stone can get on the same page, it could be very much like kind of an Aiden Childs and Nick Marsh type situation. I don't think the talent level will be quite to the level of those two that I just named, but I do think there is that upward mobility and there's that one big game that they could have together where maybe Northwestern totally shocks the world. I'd be a little bit surprised, but know the name Griffin Wilde in case that does unfold. And then Yanni Karloftis, obviously the brother of George, an incredible player in his own right in college and now in the NFL, is a very, very talented kid and absolutely someone that could end up being kind of a game wrecker for Northwestern this upcoming year. He very much wants to join his brother in the NFL, and I think he has all the ability to. Came from Purdue this offseason with the coaching change there. I think is one of those players that could really kind of burst onto the scene, even if it's a little bit quieter because his team's not winning too much. You could see some incredible stats from Karloftis at the end of the year. Ohio State receivers have been talked about a ton. You talk about Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss and all of the guys around there. Bryson Rogers seems to be the one that is catching them the most by surprise and most pleasantly surprised by, I should say, in this offseason. He's done some incredible work and he will likely be the fourth guy in that room. Doesn't mean he can't make a big-time impact. Only had 46 yards in 2024, but he's absolutely someone that is turning heads right now, and I think when you talk about the Ohio State wide receiver room, the top line, as good as you're going to possibly get, but guys like Bryson Rogers is why they're so special because he's probably starting on just about every other team in the country. At Ohio State, he's the fourth option. I think he's going to be an incredible fourth option. Then you got Kayden McDonald on the other side, another kind of fall camp star. Has played a little bit of football here and there. Obviously, Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton made that pretty hard to get in at defensive tackle over the last couple of years, but this is someone they think is a star. They think he's an NFL talent, possibly even a first rounder, an incredible, incredible player that will be put to the test pretty early when he faces off against Texas in that offensive line, but very talented kid that you will be hearing a lot from up there in Columbus this year. Oregon, if Kyler Casper doesn't hit, I don't know what this wide receiver room is. Now, Dakorien Moore, I think, is going to be a very good player, but you already lost Evan Stewart in the offseason. Jerrion Dickey just got suspended indefinitely from the team. You got to have this guy hit. And Kyler Casper is probably one of the quieter names in the entire country. Hasn't done a ton for this team throughout the last couple of years. He needs to this year. If he doesn't this year, then I think it could be a run-first offense over there at Oregon, and if you're only run-first, a lot of these defenses are going to be able to handle you. So it's going to be interesting to watch this develop. Obviously, Oregon has the talent level. That's not going to be a problem for this kid, but he's going to have to step up in a huge way, especially now with Jerrion Dickey likely not playing early on in the season at the very least. And then Amari Washington just has to be huge. I think they have so many good edge rushers on that team, but if they can hold down the interior the same way that I think they're going to be able to get after the passer, this could be the best defense in the entire conference. And I think the other part of it is I don't love the back end. I do think they're very talented. Replacing 5 guys the year after you replace 5 guys on the back end is not an easy thing to do. I think they're going to need to be elite up front, and I think this guy's going to have as much to do with it as anyone. Moving over to Penn State, Khalil Dinkins is someone that has taken over kind of the tight end 1 role that was really up in the air between Luke Reynolds, Andrew Rapelier. Don't fully know how to pronounce that name. Apologies to him. But Khalil Dinkins kind of took this job by storm. Very talented kid. Someone that has really just waited this turn, played really good football, is an incredible blocker. So you will see a lot of 2 tight end sets on this team, no doubt about it. But this seems to be the leader for this team, at least at the tight end position. I think he could be a really fun player this year that definitely won't be what Tyler Warren was a year ago, but can definitely bring some very good upside to this offense where maybe you're chasing around all the talented wide receivers and then the tight end that no one knows the name of makes a big time play for you. And then Zariah Fisher. This is the reason that I'm not all that worried about Abdul Carter moving on. Obviously, it's going to be incredibly hard, probably impossible to fully replace what Abdul Carter was to that team, but Zariah Fisher is getting some rave reviews right now. Had 3.5 sacks a year ago. I think when you put him across from Denai Dennis Sutton, terrifying in every sense of the word. It's going to be terrifying for every single quarterback that they face, and I think Zariah Fisher could be a name you hear very often when you turn on the Nittany Lions this year. Moving over to Purdue, they got a couple of transfers, obviously, with Barry Odom coming in from UNLV. They added the UNLV player in Tony Grimes, and he's going to be a big-time player for them. 5 pass deflections a year ago. This is a former 5-star. This is a guy that has that talent in him, has the ability to play really big-time football, just hasn't put it together. And we'll figure out if he can this year. And then you get Nitro Tuggle, one of the best names in the entire country, comes over from Georgia after some off-the-field troubles, and obviously, hopefully he can find his way here. Very fast, very twitchy, has every ability to be the number 1 wide receiver for this team. If he's not, it's going to be a uninspiring passing attack from Purdue this year. Over to Rutgers, C.J. Campbell is a very interesting guy coming over from FAU. Had 844 yards, 11 touchdowns a year ago. Rutgers needed the guy. After Kyle Monangai moved on, I think is a really good choice. Now, obviously, there are some more elite running backs in this conference, but in terms of the guys that Rutgers could go out and get, this is about as good as you're going to end up with. A very talented running back that is really good in between the tackles like Kyle Monangai was, but has some of that shiftiness that Kyle Monangai also had, which is making him a huge player for, what team is he on now? I believe the Bears? I could be wrong about that, but regardless, I think he's someone that could replace that talent. Maybe not fully replace the production, but at the very least make it a smooth enough transition. And then Bradley Weaver coming over from Ohio, 8.5 sacks a year ago. If Rutgers is going to do anything special, they need a really good defensive line. There's no other way for them to really have a big-time impact against these elite teams. I think Bradley Weaver is someone that could make some of those big-time plays against a Penn State or against an Ohio State and make things, at the very least, interesting for Rutgers this year. And then UCLA, Rico Flores Jr., has to put it together. He's a very talented kid that just hasn't quite put it all together. I think Nico Iamaleava obviously helps that problem for him, but He's going to have to be a huge player for this team, or this offense is going to miss the mark by just a little bit this year. And then Key Lawrence, talented kid coming over from Ole Miss, didn't really get the run at Ole Miss last year that he was hoping for. Still a very talented kid, and definitely could be someone in that safety room that kind of gives structure and leadership to that defense. I don't think it's going to be an elite defense by any respect, but I do think they have a couple of talented players. I think Key Lawrence pretty much leads that list. Down to USC, Makai Lemon is as fun of a wide receiver that very few people are talking about in the entire country. Over 700 yards a year ago, 3 touchdowns. He is going to be a star. I think he has every ability to be a first-round talent later on, and I think he's someone that, especially with someone like Jacoby Lane that's so tough in 50-50 balls down the field, having this guy underneath is an absolute embarrassment of riches. He has every ability to make 10 guys miss and go to the house. Might be a little bit overstating it, but at the end of the day, very shifty guy, has all the speed in the world, and I think in an offense that hopefully everyone's a little bit more comfortable in going into year 2 with Jaden Maiava, this could be an absolute star that takes over a game sometime throughout the Big Ten schedule. Then Keyshawn Silver. We're talking about big-time portal entries. This is about as big as you're going to find in the entire conference, and I said that a little bit earlier, but this one is especially true. The defensive line needed some big-time help, especially on the interior. Keyshawn Silver's a beast. When you watched him at Kentucky, him as well as Deone Walker were nightmares for every single defense that they would play. A huge reason why Georgia struggled in that game was they couldn't really run the ball on those two. They were absolute stalwarts in the middle, and I think Keyshawn Silver can be that for USC, and kind of needs to be that for USC. If they're going to be as successful as they can be defensively, they need to hold down the front, and that's going to be the guy that you're going to be seeing a lot of this year. Jonah Coleman over there at Washington, one of the best running backs in the entire country. Over 1,000 yards a year ago, 10 touchdowns. He is physical. He will jump over you, as you can see in that picture. He'll run around you. He can make all types of plays. And since he's reunited with Jedd Fisch over there at Washington, he's just a really, really good running back. And he's someone that brings a lot more comfort to a guy like Damon Williams, who is still kind of getting comfortable. You know, he's still fully taking over this offense. Jonah Coleman makes that a whole lot easier. I can promise you that. Very talented kid that will give Washington a lot of production on the ground. And then Dakorien Davis comes over from Arizona, does reunite as well with Jedd Fisch. 43 tackles, 6 pass deflections a year ago. In terms of pure talent, this is as good of a cornerback as you're going to see in the entire country. Very, very long, very athletic. They have Ephesians Prescott on the other side. They're going to be a good team in the pass defense, and I think Dakorien Davis could be one of those big-time stars that makes a big play in a big moment for Washington this year. And then Wisconsin. Kayden Yakimelli is very, very interesting. He's not necessarily a flashy back, not necessarily going to do, remarkable things or have elite speed by any means. He's going to get all the dirty yards you want, and he's going to be a really, really good plus blocker in the backfield. I think he's going to be a very, very plus player for Wisconsin. I don't know if he's going to be an outright star for them. I think someone else has to step up, especially in that wide receiver room, but they're going to need a run game this year. They're going to need to get back to kind of that identity of Wisconsin football. This is probably the guy that's going to have to lead the way in that respect. And then JVR Suggs comes in from LSU. One of those guys that went over from LSU. I believe he's at Grand Valley State, if I'm not mistaken. Before that, uniquely talented kid. Just kind of took a step up too fast. Now, I do think this one could be a little bit better of a fit, especially after a year of playing on and off for LSU and getting a little bit more comfortable to the speed. I think Wisconsin could have a very solid player here. I don't know if he's going to be on the All Big Ten team or anything crazy. I do think he can make some big-time plays for them, and at the very least, give that defense some structure in a year last year where it just looked like everyone was a little bit all over the place at times, and obviously allowed some teams to come back in games that they probably should have been able to close out. But it's a very weird conference. I think there's so many guys coming in from different levels of college football. There's a ton of transfer wide receivers that have to make big-time impacts. It's going to be really interesting to watch. I think so many of those guys are interesting. Zariah Fisher over there at Penn State is someone that I think could change the entire complexion of this conference this year. But we'll talk about all that in time, I promise you. Let's get into our last break here, and then when we come back, it's all about superlatives and my final pick for the championship game and the champion of this conference right after this, so stick with us.